The city of Boston shimmered beneath a late September sunset. Autumn had just started to kiss the trees with gold, and the air smelled of coffee and cold beginnings. Amelia Clark stood by the Charles River, her fingers wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold. The water rippled in the dying light, and across the bridge, laughter from college students drifted on the breeze, familiar, distant, and painfully ordinary. It had been 3 years since she'd last seen Ethan Ross. They had met in the same city, strangers at first. Two immigrants chasing impossible dreams. Ethan, a mechanical engineer from Texas who spoke with quiet confidence. Amelia, a journalist from London with a heart too soft for the world she reported on. Their love hadn't started with fireworks. It had started with friendship, cups of coffee, shared sarcasm, and late-night conversations about things they both pretended didn't matter but secretly did. How they met. It was winter 2018. Snow fell like scattered feathers across the Boston skyline. Amelia had been covering a student protest for her newspaper when she saw him. Tall, serious, trying to fix a camera stand for the university's tech club that had collapsed under the snow. She walked over, offered help, and within minutes they were both laughing, trying to balance the tripod with a scarf tied around it. Not bad teamwork for strangers, he'd said. I prefer accidental partners, she replied, smiling despite the cold. That was the start. Innocent, unplanned, and strangely inevitable. Within months, their friendship had become something deeper. Their love was the kind that didn't announce itself with grand gestures. It slipped quietly into the spaces between ordinary days. In the way he'd bring her soup when she worked late, in how she'd edit his scholarship essays because she believed in him more than he did. The breaking point, love, however, is not always enough. By 2021, their dreams began to pull them in opposite directions. Amelia's newspaper offered her a position in New York, a huge opportunity, the kind that could make her career. Ethan, on the other hand, had finally been offered his dream job at a robotics company in Seattle. For weeks, they tried to make it work, calls, plans, promises. But beneath every conversation was the same silent question neither wanted to ask aloud. Who will sacrifice first? One night, sitting on the couch surrounded by half-packed boxes, Amelia finally said it. Ethan, we're building two different futures. I don't want to make you choose. He looked at her, eyes heavy. So you're choosing for both of us? She swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe I am. The silence between them said what words couldn't. That love sometimes demands distance, even when every part of you wants to stay. The goodbye. Their last evening together was quiet. No shouting, no dramatic tears, just the weight of two people trying to be strong for each other. They walked through Boston Common, hands brushing but not holding, both memorizing the sound of each other's footsteps. At the airport, she hugged him one last time. He whispered, "If this is goodbye, I hope it's not forever." She managed a trembling smile. "Let's meet on the other side of goodbye." And then she turned away before her heart could change her mind. 3 years later. Now, in 2024, Amelia lived in Manhattan, successful, independent yet quietly lonely. She'd built everything she'd ever wanted. But some nights, when the city was asleep, she'd scroll through old photos and wonder if success had been worth the silence. Ethan had moved on too, or so she thought. His LinkedIn said he was now head of product design at a major robotics firm in Seattle. Sometimes his name would appear in tech magazines. And she'd feel that same ache, that same bittersweet pride. But life has strange timing. One Monday morning, her editor called her into the office. "Clark, there's a global robotics conference in Seattle next week. I want you to cover it. Interviews, human angle stuff. You up for it?" Her heart skipped. Seattle. She hadn't been there since him. She forced a professional smile. "Of course, I'm up for it." Arrival in Seattle. The city greeted her with rain, soft, endless, poetic. From her taxi window, she watched the skyline blur, heart beating faster than it should have. Every corner, every coffee shop felt like a question she wasn't ready to answer. The conference was held at a sleek glass building overlooking the waterfront. Amelia moved through crowds of engineers and journalists, notebook in hand, hiding her nerves behind professionalism, until a familiar voice behind her said, "I didn't think robotics and journalism overlapped this much." She froze, slowly turned. Ethan Ross stood a few feet away, older, sharper but still the same eyes, same calm energy that once felt like home. For a second, the whole room fell silent. Then he smiled, soft and almost hesitant. "Hey, Amelia." Her voice barely came out. "Hey, it's been a while." 3 years, 9 months, he said before laughing awkwardly. "Not that I've been counting." Something in her chest shifted, a mix of nostalgia, regret, and something dangerously close to hope. Unfinished conversations. They ended up talking over coffee after the conference. Like old times, except there was a polite distance now, like glass between them. "So," he said, stirring his espresso, New York Times reporter now. "You always said you'd get there. And you, robotics genius." She smiled. "I always said you would too." He looked at her for a long moment. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" She hesitated. "Every day. But maybe that's what growing up is, learning to live with the choices you made." Outside, rain tapped against the cafe window. Inside, 2 people who once loved each other sat inches apart, pretending they weren't still connected by 1,000 invisible threads. As she left that evening, he walked her to the door just like old times, and as she stepped into the rain, he called out softly, "Maybe goodbye doesn't have to be the last word." She turned, eyes glistening. Maybe not. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was pale gray, the kind of color that holds both promise and pain. Amelia woke early, unable to shake the echo of Ethan's words. Maybe goodbye doesn't have to be the last word. For years, she had buried that chapter, telling herself closure didn't always come, and that was okay. But now, seeing him again had pulled open every door she thought was locked forever. Coffee and confession. They met again 2 days later by accident. Or maybe destiny's quiet hand. She was interviewing one of the engineers at the robotics conference when someone mentioned Ethan's name. "He's speaking at the evening panel," the engineer said. Her heart fluttered. "He is?" That evening, she found herself sitting in the back row, pen idle, eyes fixed on the stage. Ethan stood there, confident, passionate, his voice calm as he explained his team's breakthrough project, an AI-driven prosthetic arm capable of mimicking natural movement. But when his gaze briefly met hers in the crowd, his composure faltered just for a second. He smiled as if remembering a private joke from another lifetime. After the panel ended, she tried to leave quietly, but he caught up to her in the hallway. "You're avoiding me," he'd said, half teasing. "I'm not." She looked away. "I just didn't expect all this." He chuckled softly. "Neither did I, but since we're both here, want to get coffee? No cameras, no notepads, just us." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Old places, familiar smiles. They ended up at a cozy little cafe near Pike Place Market, the kind with soft jazz playing in the background and the smell of cinnamon everywhere. The kind of place they would have loved years ago. As they sat by the window, rain streaked the glass again. "You still love the rain," he said. She smiled faintly. "You still remember?" He took a slow breath. "I remember everything, Amelia, even the things I shouldn't." The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. "Ethan," she began carefully. "We said goodbye for a reason." "Yeah, we did. But sometimes I wonder if the reason still exists." His words lingered in the air. Outside, a street musician started playing a violin, the tune soft and wistful, like their story refusing to fade. "I thought I moved on," she whispered. "I told myself I did." He looked at her, really looked at her. "And did you?" Her silence was the answer. Walking through memories. After coffee, they walked down to the pier. Seagulls flew low over the water, and ferries came and went, their horns echoing across the bay. For a while, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Do you ever think about what life would have been like if one of us had stayed? All the time, she said softly. But then I remind myself we did what we thought was right. We wanted each other to grow. He nodded. And did we? Amelia smiled sadly. We did, just separately. A pause. Then he said quietly, You know, I tried dating again once, but I couldn't do it. Every time someone smiled, I kept comparing her to you. Every time I heard your name, it felt like gravity pulled me back. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to either of us, he said gently. But love doesn't care about fair, does it? She laughed softly through the tears. No, it really doesn't. The invitation. Later that night, as she was packing up her notes in her hotel room, there was a knock on the door. She opened it. Ethan stood there holding a small envelope. Before you leave, he said, I want to show you something tomorrow. Something I've been working on. No pressure, just come if you want to. What is it? She asked. You'll see. The next morning, she found herself driving to a quiet industrial park outside the city. Inside one of the labs, Ethan was waiting. Wearing his work badge and a nervous smile, he guided her to a small testing area where a man stood, missing his right arm. This is Daniel, Ethan explained. He lost his arm in an accident. We've been developing a prosthetic that responds to brain signals. Watch this! Daniel concentrated, and the robotic arm moved smoothly. Gripping a pen and writing on a pad, Thank you. Amelia gasped. That's incredible. Ethan's voice softened. When we broke up, I promised myself I'd build something that mattered. Something that made losing you mean something. I guess this is it. Her eyes welled up. You didn't have to lose me to do that. He looked at her, the years between them dissolving in a heartbeat. Maybe not, but maybe I had to lose you to find myself. She smiled sadly. And what now? You found yourself. What happens to us? He didn't answer, just reached out and touched her hand. Maybe we find our way back. A walk in the rain. That evening, after the demonstration, they went for a walk near the waterfront. The rain had turned into a drizzle, the kind that feels like whispers on your skin. Amelia stopped by the edge, looking out over the gray water. It's strange, isn't it? We're standing in the same world, breathing the same air, but everything feels new. Ethan stepped closer. Maybe that's the point. Maybe love isn't about staying where you were, but finding each other again, even after everything. She turned to him. You sound like an optimist. He smiled faintly. I learned it from you. Their eyes met. Long, searching, unguarded. For the first time in years, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like peace. The photograph. Before leaving Seattle, Amelia went back to the pier alone. The conference was over. Her return flight was the next morning, but her heart was restless. She pulled out an old photo from her wallet, the one of them, taken years ago on a snowy night in Boston. She'd kept it all this time, folded and worn like a piece of unfinished business. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. Ethan stood there, breathless, rain in his hair. I wasn't gonna let you leave again, he said quietly. She blinked. Ethan, I don't care how far New York is. I don't care about time zones or jobs. We spent years building dreams apart. Maybe now it's time to build something together. Her throat tightened. Are you sure? He smiled, the same smile that once made her believe in everything. Completely. For a long moment, neither moved. The city lights reflected in the water, and the world felt suspended, fragile, beautiful, infinite. Then she stepped forward and hugged him tight, trembling, real. And this time, neither of them said goodbye. Seattle had never looked this beautiful before, not because the city had changed, but because this time Amelia saw it through different eyes. After that night by the pier, she and Ethan had decided not to rush anything. They'd promised to take it one step at a time, talk, reconnect, and see if love could grow again where it had once broken. And yet, some part of her already knew she was falling for him all over again. Morning coffee and second chances. It started with small things like coffee, Every morning before the conference wrapped up, Ethan would show up at her hotel with 2 cups. "Still 2 sugars?" he asked the first day. "Still 2," she smiled. They talked about work, about travel, about everything and nothing. It wasn't the same as before. It was quieter now, calmer, like 2 people who had lived enough to know what mattered. One morning, sitting by the window as the rain tapped softly outside, Amelia said, "It's strange, isn't it? After everything we went through, it still feels easy with you." Ethan looked at her over his cup. "That's because it was never the love that was hard. It was the timing." That line stayed with her long after he left. The museum afternoon. A few days later, they went to the Museum of Pop Culture. Amelia was supposed to leave for New York the next day, but she wasn't ready. Not this time. They wandered through exhibits, laughing at old music posters, teasing each other about terrible 90s songs. For a few hours, they weren't 2 professionals with separate lives. They were just them again, 2 dreamers lost in their own little world. At one point, they stopped before a display of old typewriters. Amelia smiled. "I used to write you letters I never sent," she confessed. He glanced at her. "Why didn't you?" "I didn't want to interrupt your life. You seemed happy." He laughed softly. "Funny, I was writing emails I never sent. Guess we were both waiting for the same silence to end." Their hands brushed, and this time, neither of them pulled away. Dinner at the harbor. That night, Ethan took her to dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the harbor. Candlelight flickered between them, reflecting off the glass and the dark waves outside. "You know," he said, leaning forward, "the last time we had dinner together, you ordered pasta and didn't touch it." She laughed. "That was the night before I left Boston." "Yeah," he said softly. "I still remember you crying in the taxi, pretending to look out the window." Her voice trembled. "And you pretending not to?" For a moment they just looked at each other. All the years, all the distance melting into quiet understanding. "I don't want to pretend anymore," she said finally. "Then don't." He reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, grounding. "Let's stop waiting for the right time. Let's make it right this time." She smiled through tears. "You really think we can just start over?" "No," he said softly. "I think we can continue from where we left off. Old wounds." The next morning, however, reality found them again. Amelia received a call from her editor, a promotion offer that would require her to relocate to London for 8 at least a year. It was everything she had ever wanted, everything she'd worked for. But now she felt torn. That evening, she told Ethan. He listened quietly, eyes thoughtful. "That's amazing news." She sighed. "It should feel amazing, but all I can think about is you." He smiled faintly. "Amelia, I don't want to be the reason you give up something you love. You've earned this." "And what about us?" He looked down. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But she could hear the uncertainty in his voice, the same ache from years ago, creeping back between the words. The decision. For the next few days, Amelia was lost in thought. Every corner of Seattle reminded her of him, his laughter, his quiet confidence, the way he looked at her like she was home. One rainy afternoon, she stood by the pier again, phone in hand, staring at her flight confirmation. Her heart felt heavy, split between 2 worlds. Then she heard his voice behind her. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye again, weren't you?" She turned. Ethan stood there drenched from the rain, his expression unreadable. "I didn't want to make it harder," she said softly. He stepped closer. "You think walking away twice makes it easier?" Tears filled her eyes. "Ethan, this job is your dream." "I know," he nodded. "And maybe I deserve to be left behind again? But I need you to know one thing before you go." Her voice shook. "What?" He took her hand, rain dripping from his hair. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Even when I told myself I had." She covered her mouth, choking back a sob. "Ethan!" "I'm not asking you to stay," he whispered. "I'm asking you to come back. When you're ready. When it's real." Amelia threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Don't say goodbye this time. He held her tightly. Then don't make me. The letter. The next morning, she left, quietly, just like before. But this time, she left something behind, a handwritten letter on his doorstep greater than, Dear Ethan, last time I left because I thought love wasn't enough. This time, I'm leaving because I know it is. I don't know when I'll be back, but I promise this goodbye isn't the end. It's just the space between two beginnings. Wait for me if you can. Amelia. When Ethan found it, he didn't cry. He just smiled, the kind of smile that carries both pain and hope. He folded the letter, placed it in his wallet, and whispered, On the other side of goodbye, I'll be waiting. 6 months later, London was colder than she remembered. Amelia's life became a blur of deadlines, interviews, and late-night editing sessions. Yet, no matter how busy she was, she always found herself checking her inbox for one particular name. Then, one night, it came, an email from Ethan. Greater than. Subject, the other side of goodbye. Still waiting, still believing, just thought you should know. E. She stared at the screen for a long time, tears blurring her vision. And, for the first time in a long time, she smiled, not out of sadness, but certainty. Because love, she realized, wasn't about staying. It was about returning. Spring had come to London, soft and golden. The air carried that sweet warmth that only follows a long winter, and the streets near the Thames were alive with people, laughter, and music. But for Amelia Clark, none of it mattered. She stood by the window of her small flat in Kensington, holding a cup of tea, staring at the rain clouds gathering far away, and thinking of him. 6 months had passed since Seattle. 6 long, beautiful, aching months. Every day she'd woken up wondering where Ethan was, what he was building, if he ever thought of her. Every night she'd fall asleep rereading his email, still waiting, still believing. Sometimes she drafted replies and never sent them. Sometimes she whispered his name into the quiet and felt it echo back. And today, for the first time in weeks, she felt something different. A pull, a certainty. It was time to go back, the return flight. Amelia booked the flight impulsively, without overthinking. For once in her life, she told her editor she needed a break, packed her suitcase, and within 24 hours, she was on a plane to Seattle. As the aircraft soared over the Atlantic, her heart raced faster than the engines. She tried to read, to sleep, but her thoughts kept circling back to that last rainy night. His voice, his eyes, his promise. When she landed, Seattle was bathed in pale sunlight. The smell of wet earth and coffee filled the air. It felt like memory itself had been waiting for her. First stop, the pier. She went straight to the waterfront, the place where they had said both their goodbyes. The wooden planks glistened from the morning drizzle. The same ferries came and went, the same gulls wheeled overhead. She stood there quietly, clutching her coat, and whispered, I came back, Ethan. But the wind only carried her words away. She smiled sadly. Maybe he was at work. Maybe this was foolish. Still, her heart wouldn't let her leave yet. And then, behind her, a voice said softly, just like before, I thought if I came here enough times, maybe one day you'd appear. She turned around. Ethan stood a few feet away, same dark jacket, same tired eyes, but a new gentleness in his smile. For a second, neither moved. Then she laughed through her tears. You came back too! He took a slow step forward. You didn't really think I'd stop waiting, did you? She shook her head. I hoped you wouldn't. The embrace. They met halfway, like gravity pulling two halves of one whole together. The moment her arms wrapped around him, the world disappeared. No airports, no deadlines, no distance. Just them. He buried his face in her hair, whispering, You're real. You're here! She pulled back just enough to look at him. I told you this goodbye wasn't the end. He smiled. It never was. For a long time they stood there, surrounded by the sound of waves and wind. Two people who had lost and found each other across time, across oceans. Coffee again. Later that day, they went back to their cafe, the one near Pike Place Market. where they'd first talked after years apart. Nothing had changed. Same wooden tables, same faint jazz in the background. But this time, the silence between them was full of peace. Ethan handed her a cup. 2 sugars. She grinned, still remembering. They talked about everything. His new research project, her London stories, the ridiculousness of long-distance flights. But beneath the laughter, a quiet question waited. What now? Finally, Amelia said it. Ethan, I don't want to lose you again, but I also don't want either of us to give up what we've built. He nodded slowly. Then maybe we don't have to choose. She frowned gently. How? He smiled. My company just opened a New York division. They offered me a lead position. I was waiting to decide. But now... He looked at her, eyes soft. Now I know where I want to be. Her breath caught. You'd move? For you? For us? In a heartbeat. Her eyes filled again. You always make it sound so easy. He reached across the table, brushing her fingers with his. It's not easy. It's just worth it. The promise. A week later, they moved together, not back to the past, but forward to a shared future. They found a small apartment in Brooklyn, with big windows and creaky floors, and plants she always forgot to water, but he always saved. Life wasn't perfect. There were late nights, deadlines, moments of doubt, but love lived in the ordinary, in burnt toast, in rain on the window, in laughter shared over morning coffee. One evening, sitting on their tiny balcony, Amelia looked at him and said, You know what's funny? What? He asked. Goodbyes taught me how to love better. He smiled, leaning closer. Goodbyes taught me how to wait. Then he kissed her. Soft, certain, eternal. And for the first time in years, both knew there would be no more goodbyes. Epilogue. 2 years later, the morning light streamed into their Brooklyn apartment, catching unframed photos along the wall. Boston in snow, Seattle rain, London streets, and finally a picture of them by the pier, smiling, hand in hand. Amelia sat at her desk, finishing her latest article titled, The Other Side of Goodbye, a story about love, distance, and how sometimes losing each other is the only way to find the truth. She read the last line aloud. In the end, love isn't about staying or leaving. It's about finding your way home again and again. Ethan entered, still sleepy, coffee mug in hand. You're writing about us again? She grinned. Always. He kissed her forehead. Then I guess we're both still writing the same story. And as the city woke up beyond their window, the two of them stood together, not on the edge of goodbye anymore, but on the bright, endless side of forever.